It's Erin Harrigan, your Hustle with Heart coach. I'm so excited to be here for the first weekly dose of 2020. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I took off the first week in January. We had our annual family vacation. We started doing that a few years ago where instead of giving our kids Christmas gifts, we do a big trip. So just got back over the weekend, but I did take off the first Monday of the year to just enjoy our time in Jamaica. So welcome back. I, first of all, want to just give you all a huge thank you. I am amazed that we have had, I think our podcast is up to, episode 47 maybe. And it's just amazing to me when I look back and think that a year ago, right about now, is when I started doing the daily dose on my Facebook page and then started the Success God's Way community that we're in and started the weekly dose. And wow, what an incredible year 2020 was. I could never have predicted that I would be in the middle of editing a book, that I would even have been called to speak and train and write on this topic of pursuing success God's way. But I feel incredibly humbled and blessed to be a messenger for this message. And, I've talked to a number of people about the book and people that are going to be reviewing it for me as I'm working on getting the layout done. And every person I've talked to has said, this message is so timely and people need to hear it. And I think it's a fine line between resting, which I think often we are called to rest. We're certainly called to observe a Sabbath in our life and in our businesses, and working and driving and striving. And that fine line where we need to be taking action, but we need to be obedient to what God is calling us to. That fine line right there is hustle with heart. So thank you all for tuning in all of these weeks. Thank you for sharing the podcast. Thank you for subscribing at my website, erinharrigan.com, to stay tuned into the podcast as well as the blog. And thank you to those who tune in live to our weekly dose. I know it's not always a convenient time, but this is the time that seems to work. And I love that everyone has the opportunity to come and watch the playback if they want to, watch it on my YouTube channel, and certainly to hear it on my podcast. So here's the deal. Tonight, we are starting out 2020 talking about why. Now, why for entrepreneurs is a huge topic, right? If you've been in any type of network marketing business, you know that you need to have a why that can make you cry, and you need to be clear on your why. And you also know there are a number of books about why, like this one that I'm showing, Simon Sinek's Start With Why, because the why is more important than the how. And when you're clear on the why, you can walk through any how, is sort of how it's been taught. But a few weeks ago, a week ago now, my pastor gave a sermon on why, and the why of Christ, really, and that the number one why, the only why that is big enough, is to love God and love his people. And what he said is, what is the why that is big enough to live for when the how isn't enough anymore? What is the why that's big enough for you to live for when the how isn't enough anymore? So when the how isn't what's fulfilling you, when the how isn't what gets you up in the morning, what is the why that's big enough? And the only why that's truly big enough for us as God-centered entrepreneurs and any follower of Christ is to love God and love his people. It's as simple as that. So he referred to Matthew and the story of Simon putting down his net and following Christ. And the symbolism, and not even the symbolism, but the reality in that, which applies to us as well, is that when called by Christ, they left their nets and they followed him. So let's consider what they left behind. They left behind what they knew, their livelihood, their previous way of work. They left behind their security. They left behind their identity as fishermen. They left behind their comfort zone. They left behind what they valued, what their life was about, to follow Christ. And then as soon as they began to follow him, everything changed. And that's true of us as entrepreneurs as well. As we shift from, perhaps we were already followers of Christ, but we weren't fully putting him at the center of our businesses and making him number one. Or in my case, where I thought I was a Christian, but hadn't really acknowledged my relationship with Jesus and hadn't really surrendered my life to him back in 2014. And that changed everything. That changed everything. And I think that what we need to remember as God-centered entrepreneurs is that as we move forward in this pursuit of success God's way, and in our hustle with heart journey, we are putting behind the way we did business before. We're putting behind the way we set goals before. We're putting behind the way we measured success before. Because as those things are our nets, if you will, like the fishermen, if you consider that if we kept dragging that along with us, not only would that slow down our progress and we'd be dragging those nets, but those nets are also picking things up along the road, right? So it's about being willing to let go of how we looked at business before and to look at it from an eternal point of view, in that our business is a vehicle to impact God's kingdom. And our business is where we can show up and reflect Christ's light to people that we may not have come into contact with otherwise beyond being in business. It's the place where we are willing to forego what we knew and how we did it to do it his way. And the number one why of all of it is to love him and love his people. Our business is one more avenue where we can love God and love his people and show his love to others. So as you step into 2020 and you've hopefully prayed over your goals and you've set godly goals, and you've gotten clear on what it is that God wants you to be doing and the goals that he wants you to be setting and the direction that he wants you to be going, the question is twofold. Number one, have you left behind your net? Have you dropped who you were and put your identity in Christ? Have you been willing to let go of the security of the doing and the constant action? And yes, we need to take action, but how we do that differently in pursuing success God's way. And is that why big enough? And are you willing for that to be the number one why, to be big enough when the how isn't enough anymore? Now, I do want to be clear about something, and that is that I think we all have a why beyond doing Christ's work and showing his love to the world. You know, it may be providing for our family. It may be providing financially to get out of debt or to get out of a situation that we're in or whatever it is. And I'm not saying that those whys aren't important, because they are. What I'm saying is, as God-centered entrepreneurs, our biggest why is really about loving God and loving his people. And if we're following Christ and we're measuring success beyond the world's tangible measurements of it, then we can measure success in knowing that we treated this client with the best service that we could give them, or we comforted that business partner, or we conducted business to the utmost of our integrity, or we provided service in a place that maybe someone else didn't want to, or whatever that looks like. All of those are pieces of what success looks like in our Hustle with Heart journey. And if we're willing to make this why of loving God and loving his people the number one why, I promise you that our businesses will have far-reaching implications and impact far beyond what we could ever have imagined. And that's because they are a ministry that he has given us to impact his kingdom and to show his love to the world. And when we're doing that, when we're walking in the center of his will, when we're being obedient to that, when we've surrendered it to him, and we're diligently taking the action, consistently taking the action that needs to be taken to do business, because we're still called to do business, he blesses that and he exponentially multiplies the little steps that we take. And I know sometimes it's hard to comprehend that because we don't see the results right away, or we don't see those things happening. But it just simply doesn't look the way we think it would look. But think about the divine connections that are happening in your business, the people that you've met and where that's led you, the ripple effect that one event or one client meeting or one contract that you've signed, that ripple effect that has had in really showing and reflecting Christ's love through your business. And I promise you, if you add those things up, you will see how successful you truly are, and how he will continue to bless that obedience in all kinds of ways. So I know this is a big topic, right? Like digging into the number one why. But I hope that you found it helpful tonight. I hope that as you're starting your 2020, which I know most everybody's already started, I just was on vacation last week. I hope that you're finding yourself really embracing what God has called you to, and how leaving those nets behind can open so much opportunity for you to continue to reflect his love. And I would love for you to get down in here in the Success God's Way community, or leave me comments on iTunes or Google Play or what have you. I'd love to hear how this resonates with you. A couple of things that I do want to leave you with before we finish up tonight. Number one, I am seeking your feedback for topics that you want to hear on the podcast this year. Number two, I'm going to be starting an interview series. So once a month, we'll have an interview of another God-centered entrepreneur. I am so excited about this. I'm just getting all the pieces in place for that this week, to start doing that once a month. And then lastly, I am seeking my book team, my book launch team. And what that means is there's lots of opportunities that you can be part of the book launch team, the launch of Pursuing Success God's Way, a practical guide to hustle with heart. And I'm going to be sharing a little more information about that. It may be just that you're sharing, some quotes from my book on social media. You may want to read a chapter of the book and give me a review, so that we have those ready to go when it's time to pre-order through Amazon. But if you are interested in being part of the book team, there's going to be some super fun stuff going on. Please, please, please message me or comment below. I'm going to be posting more about it in the next week to 10 days. But I am looking to create my book team. And I'd love any and all of you in our Success God's Way community to be part of that, because you've been on this journey with me now. Some of you for the whole year and some of you just recently, but I would love to see who wants to be part of the book launch team. So thanks for tuning into our weekly dose. If you missed this live and you're listening to the replay, or you're listening to it on the Hustle with Heart podcast, I'm excited to see how it resonates with you, and look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow for our daily dose. Have a good night.